welcome everybody, and thank you for coming along today. I guess before I start, if we are going to be using social media, you can tweet throughout the meeting. That's the hashtag is APPG ONCP. Okay, and I'm Mary Foy, MP for the City of Durham, and
I'm Paul Maynard, MP for Blackpool North and Cleveland.
And we don't share. So obviously it's lovely to see so many of you today, and today is a roundtable, and this follows on from the APPG's recent work on social participation of children and young people with cerebral palsy. And so last year we looked at social participation of children with cerebral palsy from birth to the age of 11. And we heard academics, sports people, television personalities who all shared their lived experience and their professional observations on the subject. We looked also at the social participation of young people from the ages of 11 to 18, that featured some leading voices in academia and special education and the charity sector. And those discussions highlighted the need for the education of teachers and students, the importance of participation over attendance, and the need for better accessibility, including more accessible toilets and transport. And if you did miss any of these sessions, the recordings of them are on the APPG YouTube page. So for today's session, we'll be discussing the contributions of the dedicated academics, the educators, and other experts who contributed to the work of this APPG over 2022, as well as the remarkable children and young people who gave their efforts, took part in the meetings. And then we'll also synthesize the findings of the sessions we'll look at the current state of play for the social participation of children and young people and examine the potential best course of action to ensure there is full social participation. Are there any other parliamentarians in the room at all?
I was going to say hello to Chloe Smith, former Distinguished Disability Minister, who I think addressed this APPG, did you not? You addressed one of mine on this sort of vague topic. Obviously, it's a vague topic. Yes.
Welcome to you, and I'm not sure if there are any. And what's your name?
Stephanie Fraser.
Nice to meet you. I probably haven't been introduced.
You came to our reception.
Of course I did.
Yes, right.
So they're in the Lords.
Yeah.
That's right. And are there any MPs or on the screen online? No. Anyway, welcome to you and to all our guests. And I think over to Paul. Yeah.
To try and provoke discussion. I don't think I'm going to need to do much provocation for it.
I was just going to say that I don't even know who the speakers are in the room, because there's that you probably all mixed in, or any of the guests that I need to introduce.
I don't think we're specifically having guests. It's a free for all. You can be a speaker if you like. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, you can be Madam Speaker. I'm sure you're all holding the hard copy that I've only got a soft copy of, so I'm to wave it around about. That contains the recommendations that we're about to discuss. It's particularly helpful, I think, to have Kelly in the room as a former minister who can tell us whether we are barking up the wrong tree, being hopelessly naive and utopian in what we're asking for. So that would be a helpful insight as well. But we really want to hear your views, those of you who've read it already, as to what you think. And given we have, I think, roughly an hour scheduled for this, maybe Amanda can start off with her views on each one. I'd like to put you on this. You normally have so much to say to us that I can guarantee you give people thinking time.
Okay, I'm happy to.
Well, I like being provocative, you see. There's no point being in Parliament if you don't disagree with things. So the first one involves around opportunities for school students to learn about conditions including cerebral palsy, embedded into citizenship topics and the school curriculum. Now, to be devil's advocate, I can think of nothing worse than if I was sitting in my school, sitting there. Now, here's how to play with Paul. Here's what to call Paul. Here's not what to call Paul. Paul, would you like to tell us what it's like to be Paul? So I'm just being provocative here, thinking I'm not quite comfortable with that recommendation on a personal level. But please feel free to disagree with me and tell me why it matters so much.
Perhaps if I could start there.
You can try.
I think that's obviously the recommendations that come from the evidence that we've heard from people offering their experience to this APPG. And I think that it's without a doubt there have been some really powerful, there's been some very powerful evidence about sensitization that a lot of kids often feel within their educational environment. And as an organisation ourselves, we've had numerous requests from primary schools to support their own staff in understanding the nature of cerebral palsy. In fact, I think that's come about as from the work that we did previously on primary age children. But what I think is important here is the way that is absolutely correct. It is the style and manner in which that support is given to young people, because it has to come from the young people themselves, and it has to be driven by those youngsters. And so, for example, the little boy in the mainstream school, he was getting into trouble and finding himself in trouble because of his issues with balance, which he misunderstood, and so he was bumping into people, and there were problems in the playground. So he simply wanted an opportunity to talk in a facilitated way to his peers within that setting about his condition, and to actually demonstrate his strengths as well, as a fellow pupil of the school. So I think that it is definitely about thinking through the way that is done within the framework of the curriculum. It can be done very badly, but it also could be done very well, speaking as an ex-teacher myself.
And the other ex-teachers in the room, that you might share that view. There's always ex-teachers in the room.
I'm a current teacher.
Current teacher even better.
But the school I work in, the kids we have are, well, the majority of them have cerebral palsy, but they're all non-verbal wheelchair users. Most of them would have what we call profound and multiple learning disabilities. So maybe not the mainstream, that we're a special school basically. But yeah, I mean, we do, I'm listening to what you're saying with interest.
Just to share an experience, so we're from an independent specialist college, so 16 to 25-year-olds with a large proportion of our cohort cerebral palsy, with a range of abilities. And we have had young people go out and talk to primary schools about their experience, so to mainstream primary schools using AAC devices and things like that. It's been very powerful, we found, for an 18, 19-year-old to talk to a group of 7, 8-year-olds and sometimes shock them with what they can do with their wheelchairs and their communication, etc. So there's something about that age dynamic that I think works quite well as well, and I would advocate that.
I'm a parent governor after staying in establishment, and my daughter, we just moved back from Hong Kong, and my daughter actually would go into primary schools in Hong Kong to use her AAC device, and she fitted in with a curriculum there. It was PYP and topics on saying the difference, and it was a very simple eye gaze using a PowerPoint she could use, but the power it gave to the children of understanding that difference, yet she was the same. She could see, she could hear, they could all do that, but also she talked differently to them.
Yeah.
What works quite well for us is we've had mainstream students coming in to spend time on work experience in our school, and that's been a nice opportunity to share those experiences.
And have they been a secondary age, right?
Yeah.
Was a hand up sort of somewhere down that direction?
Yeah, sorry, not a teacher, just my 16-year-old with he is non-verbal wheelchair user, and he he's 16, and he likes what you were saying about teaching or talking to other people, because he's non-verbal, even the basic yes and no, and showing little ones this is how I can understand you, you can't understand me. He likes that, and showing them the basics. So it's just something that he would find.
So when it's directed by the individual
Yes.
themselves,
Yes.
rather than mediated by someone
Yeah.
speaking on their behalf,
Yeah.
that perhaps is what really makes a difference.
Yes.
I guess I'm a trainee clinical psychologist, and I've been working in Great Ormond Street with visible difference. So it's not quite the same, but I think the idea was the same, that I spent a lot of my time writing to schools and individual teachers and teaching them how to have conversations with the children about the particular visible difference, and that would obviously depend on the child and the condition. But I think maybe something that I was trying to think, because you like made me think about how that would be for the individual in the class at a class level, and maybe if it wasn't, you know, so specific, if we managed to integrate talking about difference more widely, then that would also have a positive impact on the people with visible differences, other conditions, and things like that. And it might not be then as intrusive to that one person with the one condition on that one day, if that makes sense. But I don't have the perfect answer.
The other thing I would say too is the younger the better.
Yeah.
Go in and talk to primary one children, even preschool, that they do actually understand it. It becomes a much easier thing to understand.
So my name is Christian. I'm a children's physiotherapist working for an NHS trust in Portsmouth. And actually reading about introducing the curriculum about reducing ignorance and the stigma, actually, I noticed that there's much need of that, because I've followed 3 children with cerebral palsy in a mainstream school, and it was a secondary school. It was really tricky to get these kids accepted and to help the teachers to meet their needs. And all of them actually experienced bullying, and one we had to go with a pediatrician, with Maria. And it was actually hard to come back after a surgery at the hips and actually saying, well, you need to go back to school as soon as possible, but you got a hip brace, which keeps your hips apart. And actually the child was like, oh, actually, I'm not really keen for other people to see me with the brace, which tells a lot about how much work is needed. And also, the more we bring the kids with disability into mainstream schools, then the more the other kids are exposed to learn about what is disability. In the long run, will be also for parents, when they hear from us, early diagnosis of cerebral palsy, to not be scared about the word, but actually, oh, I had a child in my class in primary, secondary with cerebral palsy. So I think the good thing is that this school and the centers be supportive, and things are moving on and now improving. That was really hard work that first year. So.
It seems to work really well when there's a kind of shared activity, so it's not just all about the disability. I mean, at our school we've got a farm, and actually it works really well because we have mainstream kids coming in to work on the farm, and our kids also work on the farm, and they're looking after the animals. It's nothing to do with it's actually more about what they can do and the things they've got in common. It's not kind of, you know, we're doing a talk about this person's disabled, and actually that can work very well.
I totally agree. One of the things that we use is sport. So where we've got, say, for example, the volunteer or new age curly, which is traditionally a disability focused sport, then we actually, our students coach the mainstream primary school students in terms of that sport. So it's already something they can do very well. So it just shifts that dynamic in terms of their age. They're still learning past their sport.
I'm just wondering whether actually our frustration is really that, particularly for children in mainstream schools, that those schools don't go and find out about cerebral palsy. So there's a frustration amongst all of us, and I think it applies to schools. I think it also applies to employers. You know, and because cerebral palsy is such an umbrella condition, everybody's different. What we really want is that if you have a child with CP in your mainstream school, or an employee with CP or whatever, that you go and find out about CP. So I'm just wondering if there's a sort of, rather than, it's sort of 2 strands, isn't it? There's a sort of informal child to child discussion, or older child to younger child. We've used that in Scotland, it's been extremely successful. But there's also a sort of, you know, in terms of policy thinking, what we want is that if you have someone with a particular disability, in this case CP, you should be encouraged to go and discover about that.
It's like a disability confident school as well as a disability confident
Yeah.
employer.
Yeah, exactly.
I just, as someone who also grew up near the same kind of people with cerebral palsy, the idea of doing this would also feel really great. And I also wouldn't have liked it. Maybe that's because of culturally things are shifting now as we're moving. But I think that in some ways the onus here is on the child doing it, and actually it's more about the environmental changes that we need to think about, as I said, both and also understand that there seems to be a difference in experience for people who are attending mainstream school to those that are attending a special school, and perhaps there needs to be different strategies depending on the environment that somebody is in. Because the thing that came across really clearly for me from the work that's been done here is that your experiences in childhood really do impact your thinking as you get older, your experiences, your aspirations. So this for me is a wider piece on what role modelling is there in school around seeing other people with disabilities who are being successful, all those people who are in the school, rather than the education of everybody else. Actually, what are we doing for the education of people with CP to say that you can?
And it only takes one teacher to have a negative reaction in your school that for that to live with you for the rest of your life. Even if 99% of the rest of the teachers are all fantastic. If one teacher told me, we're doing compulsory badminton, Paul, you sit to one side because you have no chance of hitting anything, then that lives with you forever. I've never played badminton since. Or it's the best. But it takes one little episode to jar on an impressionable young mind, and that has a lifelong consequence that you just referred to. In terms of curriculum, how do people think that we should adjust that curriculum? Should we at all? Is the curriculum the problem, or is it about training staff differently?
Sorry, it's a kind of mix of both, because to access the curriculum, there may need to be some sort of adjustment. So again, you need to know the child with the cerebral palsy and what level they're at, accessible to access the class, and what changes need to be made for them to give them the same level of access to what you're trying to teach them. But at the same time, the other thing is I've lost the thread of what I was saying now, because I've just realised there's like lots of people staring at me.
So just
Yeah, not just the curriculum. It needs to be slight changes in both to make it work.
Is there anyone here who delivers training into the education system? Ish. Ish is good enough for me.
The value of which I don't know, but I'm an occupational therapist and often going to schools and explaining or working with children. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a bit of everything, but I want to propose maybe a more disruptive concept of what a curriculum is. And if we're looking at education, it's what's the purpose of that? It's to help the young person grow up and be able to have a healthy, happy life and contribute to the communities they're in. And what we're seeing, because of the pressures on the curriculum and the academic side, it's not extending to apply within the community. So opportunities for the kids to go out and play in a regular park, not just use different facilities, going shopping, the applied aspect. And that's what I've been seeing with the challenge is often getting a child to and from school. They're not allowed to, they're not on a bus with somebody else to use their communication device. So they can't sing along in the bus, or they're isolated at the point of the school, and they're not allowed to sneak behind, and they've got the mind of trying to get them into a taxi in time. And there's thinking broader about the school curriculum, that it needs to be less within the school building itself, and community educating the public. so that the kids are received within the public when they do a school trip. I had the privilege in school half time. I was working with 24 children under the age of 5, and we took them, possibly ill-advised, on rock climbing.
Okay.
Yeah, am I here? Measure my blood pressure. The measure of the success of the activity, but it was the attitudes of the supportive staff, really, the preparation, and we had firemen, wonderful firemen with us, for helping us, and it just engaging in the community aspects that build on what you learn in the school classroom into the public.
And it wasn't the teacher that was a woman. The person I hated most at school was my taxi escort. It was killing me. And she still comes into my dreams. Oh, poor old barrel. You had to think what she was doing. And she had 5 of us, and so often it's not the people who you think need to be trained. It's those who are possibly in the lowest paid, more taken for granted roles, and maybe also need that training as well. So you're the back end.
I just want to go back to your Ben from Caldwell Building. Just coming back to your original point, Paul. We've got such a wealth of evidence and expertise in the room. I think it'd be great to hear from some of the parliamentarians and civil servants about where can we go with this and what are the next steps.
We have civil servants in the room.
I think so.
I don't think so. I think. No, did you have your hand up? Yeah. You're hidden behind the house.
I'll have a brief one. With apologies, I have to go at 4:30, so I'll say a big thank you for sharing your insight, which has been really great to listen to. I just wanted to endorse everything that has been said today, but also pick up the point about playgrounds and how that section of social participation to be made better and can be made better. And there are some movements that do some, probably better experts in this in the room than I am, but there are symposia on this point, and there are various organisations working towards this goal. It obviously goes wider than cerebral palsy, but it would, I think, be fabulous if the APPG could join up with some of that work, if that hasn't already been done. Forgive me if it has. And in terms of the other recommendations here as well, I think the one in terms of planning and design for public facilities and spaces is it's going to be one of these. I don't know if Paul would agree with me. It's a really strong idea, quite hard to achieve in law.
It's utopia.
Its heart is in the right place, and we might then go on to a conversation about how the Equality Act really works and whether it does, and all of that. But thank you so much for listening. I'm going to have to.
No, thank you. Now, I know as a former minister, as will Chloe know, it is very unfair to put civil servants on the spot with just officials. If they want to not say anything, I will let them off. But if they would like to, the floor is theirs.
Sorry. I don't have anything particular to say other than this is fantastic thing to hear. My name is Callum, by the way. I'm from the SEND and AP team at the Department for Education. I was born with cerebral palsy. I was diagnosed with epilepsy at 14, and I'm just here for my first time visiting this group, and it's amazing to hear you and to take it all on board for everything we're doing over it. Fantastic.
And that's really useful, isn't it? Then
yes.
Somebody with CP being part of that policy making, I guess. Yeah, excellent.
Make sure the minister pays attention to you.
Are you involved centrally at work at the moment?
Not in a arrangement a lot. I was part of when we're currently doing the analysis on the call for evidence on unregistered alternative provision, which was a commitment in the green paper.
Amanda will grab you at the end.
Yeah. He's forward now.
I wanted to add one thing, obviously participation. One thing that we've been pushing was about PE, participating in PE, and that doesn't mean being a referee. Obviously, there's been published the PE cards from the old nations, which are fun somewhere, and I printed off all of that. My worry was like, and I'm giving something to teachers or Senkos or PE teachers that they already know or they're already aware of. And actually that wasn't. So maybe working on how we distribute these informations with amazing cards with different games and how the PE teachers actually have access to this and get trained. Because what we see in these schools is that usually the kids, they just think that teachers, support teachers, beneficial to stay in a room and practice the physio exercises, bridging and calming. And what actually lots of them enjoy is actually being out and doing gymnastics and maybe using equipment to get on and off the floor and be part and making friends and during the PE rather than staying isolated in a room, which normally is small, the smallest in the coldest, the school as well.
And I feel you're relating on a wider point, which is that you can teach all the teachers what to do, but often it's the teachers you have the least to do with who might have the greatest impact. If you're only doing PE for half an hour a week, say, but the PE teacher is completely ignorant, it's those memories that will live with you longest, because for some reason PE, the physicality is a very subject. You can't hide at the back, you either do it or you can't do it. So unless that particular PE curriculum is shaped around the needs of those who see PE, particularly in a mainstream setting, then if that PE teacher doesn't think, how do I include everyone, then it's like for me to have to go and sit on the sidelines.
Is there I'd be interested to hear from the people here from the special schools, whether there is more to be done in terms of sharing those skills between specialists and mainstream schools, because it strikes me that there are people whose daily lives are about making inclusive activities for young people with cerebral palsy who've got so much to offer their mainstream colleagues, and it seems to me a little bit the two operate in separate zones, when in fact there is far more that could be done, and I wonder if there's something that could be looked at in terms of that continuing professional development and sharing the skills across not just specialists and mainstream, but between independent and maintained schools, because I think there's also lots to be said around that sharing of expertise that often doesn't happen.
Right, so I'm Sandy, I'm a children's physio. Offset, I mean, where's the accountability? Is there an expectation? I mean, is it goodwill that this will happen, or should there be a minimum standard? If you have a child in the school who has cerebral palsy, then the PE teacher knows how to adapt a PE curriculum. If you have, and if they need learning adapted, that they know how to adapt the learning curriculum. There should be an accountability within the school, rather than the child have to tell their classmates about themselves. It should come the other way round. Does that make sense? The thing is, but before I was in the special school, I was teaching in mainstream, but I was responsible for special needs within the mainstream, and it's quite frustrating when you're trying to deliver training to mainstream staff about any kind of disability or special needs, because actually so much of the principles of it are just good teaching anyway, actually, and that's the point you're trying to get across. When you're running training, the people who tend to attend that training, usually you're preaching to converted, because they're people who are already minded to to work in a more inclusive way. They've already got an interest, and then of course if you're running mandatory training, then it changes the atmosphere again, because then it feels like something they're obliged to do. But I certainly think if it can be seen rather than adapting what you're doing, but actually just thinking about the key principles and actually how they, I mean, I'm sure you find this maybe as well at National Star. But also seeking out, so that is a really good idea about having special schools having that knowledge that if you have a child in your school who has cerebral palsy, needs an adapted PE curriculum, you seek out some advice from somewhere else that you demonstrated, rather than it just, as you say, a tick box kind of mandatory training kind of exercise, more practical than that.
For me also, there's something about people understanding the value of that physical education at that stage for that person for their long-term health and well-being. And if we don't understand that, then why would we bother to go to the extra lengths and all the extra things that happen, even if it is what's on the curriculum? It's about that innate understanding, I think, that isn't there to understand the value of this for all sorts of reasons.
So does it in that, sorry, I'm Julie Beswick, Chief Executive of Children with Children
we're a pan disability charity, but we have huge amounts of children who have a full work with families and their siblings. So it was if come back to the initial training at the very beginning of teachers and everybody that actually works with children with families with disability, which I know is a huge vision. But if you're going to implement something like this, which we've been involved with at Maynard, then we've got to think big vision. And that does involve government policy. And so that's what we're around this table, because there's huge amounts of charities, huge amounts of people, fantastic teachers, fantastic GPs, etc., all working in isolation, but there isn't a vision of trying to bring this from top down bottom up, to actually ensure the fact that we are looking after children and young people and employers. There's lots and lots of organisations, but there isn't any. We're all trying to connect the dots basically, but the dots aren't being connected. So how do we do that? Just thinking of it from up here, rather than we're all talking at the bottom level, all doing basic jobs, you know, just trying to work it out, spinning wheels.
Is it baked into teacher training? Can I ask the teachers?
No. I would encourage you to have a look at the level of SEND training in the mandatory teacher training programme. It's minimal. As an employer, and we're looking for SEND expertise. We are a teacher training organisation ourselves. We actually established that because we couldn't recruit with the SEND expertise, and we bake it into our programme. But I would encourage you just to look at the standard teacher education training. It is absolutely minimal on SEND, let alone any kind of consideration about cerebral palsy. We recently appointed a newly qualified teacher who's having 1 day in 3 years. So I would really encourage it as an organisation and as a group. I think that would be some real value, because you're absolutely right. We can address it on the individual level and practice in small local areas. But what we're looking for is fundamental change. And I would suggest that the other is about what's measured in terms of, I think that's where you're going, in terms of what's measured in terms of the quality of education. So at the moment we talk about qualifications, attainments, league tables, etc. And you've got Ofsted coming in as a regulator looking at the quality of what's on offer at that point in time. But how do we measure the quality of what I think we're talking about there, about citizenship and about quality of the young people coming out of those schools as active citizens. So for me, those would be two fundamental bits I would really recommend.
Because then you can have those conversations with the teacher side and the children or people side and say, and then you can marry up those issues and put it into practice and say, this is what it should be.
One of the barriers as well is the actual curriculum generally, where there's less importance on those subjects that aren't the academic subjects as well, like the drama and dance and music. They're usually, if you have a disability, I'm not just talking about cerebral palsy here, but some of those subjects are the ones that bring
so while
out of each
other, not in school, why things that we can actually, that everybody can participate in, because those are the things that, you know, you can support.
But these subjects are, I know there are some schools that just ignore them, what the Ofsted are saying in the national curriculum, and they're going ahead and do because they know they help their students. But I think that's so sad that those more participatory subjects, like where you can break down barriers and show some of your other strengths and abilities, aren't as seen as important now within the national.
And every school could be buddied up with a charity that could highlight and practice that into the school. So, you know, there's so many answers to everybody's challenge that we can either get from experts by experience or teachers that are struggling. Because tell you what, I bet you there's people in this room could come up with the answers to every challenge.
But sometimes you can't ignore Ofsted then though, and not everyone can do that. Well, one step.
Before we move on to the second chunk of the wider stuff, can I take one there and one there?
I'm not a teacher and I haven't worked with curriculums, but I've got a background physio and I'm an academic doctoral student. And one reflection I would share is the diversity of cerebral palsy and how every individual has their own unique set of needs. So to make that with a curriculum would be very challenging. It's more like the principles behind the approach and be shared. And I almost advocate for like a mentor type system where someone who's been through the system and has, well, like Matt, you do a lot of work as a mentor, don't you? Going in and helping people participate in sport and adapting from an individual level.
Yeah. I'm doing I'm an adult PT and I do para sport. I do a lot of different types of sports, which is really interesting listening to all of this because as a child I was never allowed to do any sports. So it's discovering sports has been really transformative. And I just think like, what would that have looked like if I could pick it up from being a child? Like, it's very
missed opportunities, which I think we can all share, but you know, I only discovered at 48, oh, I can do weightlifting. And this lady at the back.
It was just posing a question really about how it's changed. So I'm a paediatrician working in Hampshire and work with medical students a lot and do lots of teaching. We've had to really bang on the doors of medical schools to really, you know, we've now got really good training systems so that everybody, whatever you do in medicine, has to be some tiny community peds. They're learning about children with disability. But how do you change the curriculum? So I'm posing that question because, you know, where do you start to change it? Because, you know, we're talking about it and it does need to change, but then how do you change it? What are the things that any of us should be doing to help, to be writing to our own MPs to say this needs to change?
Always right, MPs.
How do you change it? If the curriculum needs to change.
You don't know the answers to that, but my name is Maynard. I'm from the Disability Unit in the Cabinet Office. And for those who may or may not be aware, we're currently scoping a disability action plan, which will have ambitiously some overarching changes across government, not only from Cabinet Office, but other departments, transport, education, and health. So we'll be opening consultation later on in the year, and I can't claim that we'd be able to do all the things we want to do, but I would strongly encourage anyone to write into consultation for that, and engage with consultation exercises as we'll be rolling them out. Unknown yet what they'll look like, but they will happen at some point around summertime.
So shall we down just a bit beyond the cluster maybe? Because the third recommendation is the one that annoys me most, because it's my sense of personal pride. So when I was Transport Minister, I was in charge of transport accessibility, and I wrote the government's inclusive transport white paper to try to demystify the area of accessibility, because I always got annoyed that it would seem to be about installing wheelchair ramps everywhere. All people wanted was wheelchair ramps. I wanted to try to rethink it as being, how do you design a transport system that everyone can use without having to retrofit accessibility onto it? That was 5 years ago now, gosh, and we're on to the third rewrite of that original document, most of which has not been implemented in those preceding 5 years. So, whilst I think that's a fantastic recommendation we have here, as I indicated to Chloe, it's one a bit utopian to me. Gosh, we're going to have everything, we're going to have it now. It's going to be fantastic. So that's me being controversial and objectionable again, just to provoke you all to argue back at me. So who disagrees with me? It's going to be difficult.
But can I just sort of come back a bit on what you said? I mean, I think what we should be concentrating on is what's happening at government level. So things like, you know, your review, the STEM reviews and all that, you know, where are the opportunities and what can we get out of those particular opportunities? So, you know, I come back to how do we change the curriculum. I've got no flipping idea. I come from Scotland and our curriculum's even worse than down here. But things like, you know, I spend a lot of time, when I was talking to DWP the other day about being a disability confident employer and how to liaise with their customers in a confident way, you know, and I do think something like an equivalent for schools and colleges is a pretty good idea, you know, but what opportunities can we identify? And I think we should be hammering through on those.
When I was try not to hesitate to guess on how to change the curriculum because education policy is not my specialist area. But I think it's to do, you correct me when I'm wrong, because the college of teaching, I think, determines the content of teacher training. Teachers will now tell me I'm wrong. I think they determine what goes into the teacher training curriculum.
I think what you're talking about is probably around the national curriculum, which obviously shapes what's in mainstream schools. So when you get into post-16 now, post-16 we can shape and write our own curriculum. But in terms of what's shaping practice in schools, it's the national curriculum. So it's about.
But in terms of how teachers become teachers,
Yeah.
and whether or not they can tick a box to say that they have appropriate SEND training, is there not a sort of professional qualification
I think
route that we can go down? Yeah.
Yeah, it would be about what the requirements are in terms of the.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a college of teaching, but there'll be set requirements in terms of teacher training. Yeah, so it's the standard required into that.
And somebody set those standards.
Yes.
And that's what you would need to alter. Now, whether that is so high level that a minister would not include what you were talking about is entirely probable. But someone somewhere down the food chain is making those decisions in the DRP.
It would be nice to see it rather than sort of some kind of separate module that you've got to opt into. It would be nice to see something running right through all of the teacher training. You know, so that it becomes part of the root and branch to what you know, how you deliver your practice, rather than something you think, well, you know, I've got an interest in that, I'll go for that, and it's something separate. I think that's the wrong way to. I think it starts and stops
on that team and writing the curriculum. I mean, what expertise have they got in terms of SEND? Is that you?
Not something I'm involved.
No, okay.
But is it, sorry, I keep coming back to the same point I don't mean to, but is it about, from policy level down, it's something about valuing disability? It's not about separate and different, it's about including it in all levels of the policy, because this hits so many different policy levels. We can change things in schools, we can change things at the change things all over the place, but there doesn't seem to be a sense of the fact that actually this is important, this is valued, and actually we're seen as citizens, and therefore within policy that it has to be thought about as a normal thing that one would consider.
So let me put that. I think there are certain areas where government, parliament, legislation leads society on and society follows and things change. There are other areas where society is in advance of where politicians have got to, and we trundle along behind trying to catch up with where society has got to. And I think disability is one of them, where society might be moving forward faster than parliament, legislation and politicians can keep up.
So I guess that's back to Amanda's point then, how do we help them to
by emailing your MP? But it's going to be so much more than that. I mean, I was struck that when I was first an MP, I did so many roundtables with local disabled organisations. I haven't done one in about 6 or 7 years. The issue has actually gone down the food chain a bit in my own local area. I don't know about yours. But I used to get a lot more than I do now. I mean, in this particular field, it's dropped down the order of priority for whatever reason.
But I think that, I just think that's back to my point about grasping the opportunities as they come up. So, you know, for us, on our side, we've got the online safety bill coming on, thanks very much, you know, and you know, implications for AAC users and specific issues for, you know, disabled people. I haven't quite seen enough of that on the face of the bill, for example.
And it's how Parliament works is a problem.
Yeah.
Because as MPs, I can't go through that bill line by line and interpret where I could insert really fantastic stuff. If someone comes to me and says, this is what I want, so I added a new clause about banning flashing images that provoke epileptic fits because someone thinks that, you know, I thought, I'm epileptic, I can get that, I can run with that. We got the bill changed. Now, if someone comes to me with something else, I'm happy to trundle down and put the moment down because I feel empowered to do so. But if it's just me, put that there, I don't do that. I certainly haven't got the knowledge because we're supposed to be masters of all trades when we simply can't be. We are, you know.
And my other point on that is that government works on data. So, you know, the SEND review is an interesting one because it looks like there's an awful lot of increase in SEND children with neurodivergent disabilities. And therefore the focus, I was grabbing Amanda quickly on it, on CP and, you know, it's back to people with physical disabilities, oh, it's all about ramps. No, it's not. So what data can we provide between all of us to challenge these kind of issues?
Yeah.
How often do they get bullied?
Yeah,
Sorts of
exactly.
bullying that are correct.
One of the problems is that and correct me if I'm wrong, but when head teachers are asked to provide data, the nature of cerebral palsy is often lumped into other disabilities. So, you know, it's really difficult to actually extrapolate specific data on CP from, you know, disability data. Or
Do you have to have a statement to be included in the numbers? Because I wouldn't have been included. I wouldn't have been included then.
Exactly. And obviously, you know, the nature, because, you know, we've talked about this on many occasions, but actually it isn't simply about the pure physical challenges. It's about the learning challenges as well of those youngsters within the school environment. And data is yeah, I mean, it is about data, but sometimes the mechanisms for capturing that data just aren't in place at the moment.
But we always say that. So is there anything we can do to move forward a little bit?
And change.
You know, it won't be perfect, but I'd love to sit here this time next year and we've made a bit of progress.
Maybe a little census. We need to work on.
Sorry, it's right. I guess in response to that, I suppose that highlights the importance of consultation with experts by experience in everything that is put through, and I just don't think that's happening enough. And I think that's probably a wider level than just this. But I went to another APPG about and it was done by blind people about the new floating bus stops. They weren't consulted about those. They're an absolute tragedy. Like, I just, you know, I think this is just a common theme across all areas. Why are we not consulting experts by experience more for everything? Because then you don't necessarily need as much data if it's not there, but you can speak to a lot of people, you know.
I'll tell you why. Because so my inclusive transport white paper, I had 4 civil servants, half of whom left halfway through the process. So there was no continuity of attention. They hadn't got the bandwidth quite simply to speak to everyone. I ended up asking for every single consultation submission to be printed off for me to take home over one Christmas. I read it all, and I got reshuffled 2 weeks later. So the actual machine, you might think the machinery of government is of such Rolls-Royce quality that perfect policy will emerge. Actually, you've got a handful of people handling furiously to try and keep going. And a lot of that doesn't always elevate up to what ministers then see. And not every minister is remotely interested. Shock news. In actually what they're in charge of. So there's a lot of hurdles you have to get over as an interest group or as an experienced professional to make your voice heard. That's why we have, you know, dysfunctional state. I'm very good at that.
And everyone is.
Be a bit more positive then.
Please.
I'm just trying to think of something tangible to take forward, and a change in the curriculum. It's not easy to do, but I think they can work more easily in addition to their curriculum, and a change in the type of data, the emphasis of the data, not just things you can measure because, you know, attendance does. Your child with CP at your school, do they get involved? Can they get to the toilet? Do they have their hours of whatever therapy they're supposed to get? But actually, maybe like the impact statements for rewards, that we add to that, like having a creative solution to the problem for access or for engaging a child who uses a sticks or a rollator in football in your school. How do you come up with a creative solution? And the schools and the teachers can be rewarded with that. So to think outside the box, whereas at the moment we just think to tick the box rather than tick the box that's not there. So, and that goes with health as well as policies to praise creativity. And I'm going to challenge that it's not just education, but in health professions, we use the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health to guide and direct some of our common language in what we measure. And I was shocked and horrified over the weekend writing a paper on MEDS, a new program for children with autism, that there is no word for imagination, there's no word for creativity, there's nothing in that document to value something that's really important for problem solving.
Yeah, going back to looking at the individual as well and the meaning of the individual's experience, I think impact could be measured and shared from the voice of the children themselves. So case studies essentially.
And those can be pulled into the data that you're asking for. What difference have you been able to make from the voice of?
And if they don't have a voice, an adapted way that they communicate the impact.
You want it first, Alex?
Yes, so it's just this is what happened to me and Alfie. Alfie is non-verbal, but we started up a Facebook page, Don't Pass the Buck, and that's how we share our life and all the difficulties for transport, for social inclusion, where we can get in, where we can't get in, where we get turned away. I don't put anything about school on there because that's a different thing. I mean about the real world and about writing to your MP, about accessing changing places, campaigning about wheelchair swings in the park and all that sort of thing. We've done all of that.
And changing places has made the progress it has made in central government because of people emailing MPs on a really good campaign being run.
That was a big run.
It percolated through and action was taken.
Yes.
But it does prove it actually does work.
But they need to get enough people to do that, which was but there was the Changing Places Consortium to go. That's like a hub. So parents on their own, 1,000 parents, 2,000 parents could have done that emailing. It may not have had the same impact unless the Changing Places Consortium was in. The Changing Places Consortium was in place, and that was the hub, and that's why it was pushed forward. But all of us on our own, the parents on their own, or the children or young adults doing it may not have had the same thing. It's like how far you push. Same with I wrote to our local MP many times about the wheelchair swing we got them in 4 parks. We're going to get them in the number 5 soon for a wheelchair swing and level access roundabout, just so they can get on it instead of just sitting there at the park where their brothers and sisters.
And creating positive stories.
Yes, things like that, which is what we do on. That's what how we
What did the MP do out of interest?
He had his picture taken in the paper, but I think he just did a quick email to the county council, no, Horsham District Council, which is where our council is. Yeah, it's the Horsham MP. He's Jeremy Quinn. That's it. Sorry. He just sent an email across saying, "Can you listen to this lady?" But it's always like it's Alf's swing. Oh, Alfie wants a swing, does he? Or Alfie wants a toilet? Or Alfie? It's thousands of people that
I have an identical case right now in my constituency that I can't get my local council to remind of. Why don't we install something just for one person?
That's what and they believe.
But it's not.
But they don't see that. But yes.
There's one point that I know, just bringing back to the point that you were actually making, that you have a lot of data to go through, etc. But take about data of people that have got sport that they can go to. So, for example, if we did actually run a project where we needed to wade through data or wade through a lot of paperwork, that's where we can go to universities and students that are interested in doing research, and that's something that we could actually do online, or you could do it as well. We talk people understand what we do that. And that's something that students would jump all over and sort of interested in doing that. So if ever you find yourself in that position, please contact organisations like ourselves to support you about we're on the front line and we really want to help kids and families. So that's why, if we have big visions, then we can actually pull them off.
I'm sure the civil servants have heard that and will now be competitive or
You know, I've
Should
tried to follow that many a time, and that's been a disappointment to us when we've been at APPGs and said, look, we can help, we can do this, we can make a difference. So, you know, I'm just putting that on the table. You know, we know what sort of job we actually do have, but we're here to help and we're here to assist, otherwise we're not here just to, you know.
Just an idea, obviously, I'm not really expert in all this, but what about the Ofsted rating? What are the criteria? Because you can play the other way around and say, oh, actually, you score really low in Ofsted, and I bet all the schools really care about that, and then let them find a solution to go up in the rating.
Because what is measured is what matters.
Yeah, obviously, I come from the NHS, and when the CQG comes and gives out a rating, everyone is up on their feet. So maybe Ofsted.
Well, we'll make it last for the week.
Yeah, true.
That's often our message. Sadly, it was what drives change in cultures of school. You know, many members of that. But it's actually, unfortunately, it is regulated accountability that often makes people sit up and think we should be doing better. And so going back to those cases, you know, where family and children and students are consulted about the quality of their experience, that needs to be fed much more and into those Ofsted inspections. But you know, again, it's looking at the framework and the questions that inspectors are asking of heads, because as you rightly say, often the focus is on those hard subjects rather than on the soft subjects and on the culture of the school, which is, I think, what we pulled together from the evidence that we heard and some of that, you know, area around how do we measure the culture and the ethos of the school and the way that it reflects the experiences of those young people.
And how can an inspector capture that?
Yes.
They would have to happen to wander past the PE lesson at the 1.1 pupil who needs that integrated PE lesson might be not getting it or getting it.
And it goes back to that solutions focus, that the attitudes of the people who, and the abilities and the skills and knowledge of those people to actually look at the individual needs and find solutions for those.
So maybe they need to do what CQC does. They obviously look at facts and figures, but they will interview a certain number of young people, adults, parents that use that service. So maybe doing that.
On that one.
And but specifically looking at young people who've got disabilities, whatever they are.
And could we also include colleges in that as well, and colleges of further education and experiences of young people within those, because we've heard from a number of young people who have actually had a reasonably good experience in their school, but then they've gone into colleges where they.
And I might suggest that, I mean, obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but my experience is not as good in secondary as it is in primary. And so maybe it's starting somewhere, and also it's that really influential part of a young person's life that needs to be right. So,
I'm Laura, I'm an occupational therapist for the service, and I guess stemming from a lot of what we talked about in school, like if I'm hearing then young adults and adults later in life and kind of similar themes in the workplace, and a lot of people are telling me how they don't feel like they belong, that they feel like their employer doesn't want them there. I think that theme of just having an inclusive environment, it seems to be like some of that core principles that are driving through, and the fact that, you know, like that, it's not just a Twitter for one person, it's actually making the world an inclusive place that benefits us all. In school, it benefits, you know, the teachers, it benefits everybody else at school, and similarly in the workplace and in society as a whole. And that kind of, I know it sounds like it's just going back to those core principles of inclusivity and you know, that's really going to benefit everybody at the end of the day.
I will sort of say on that point that I am lucky enough to be in an incredible workplace who are very thoughtful of me, and know other people in similar situations throughout my career in different workplaces, different levels and abilities, but the work done to be inclusive. The key kind of strategy that's really affected me as an adult with cerebral palsy going through career change and things like that, has been reverse mentoring and ethics like that. And that's, and you,
Yeah. And you need to be in the right culture that the person you're reverse mentoring doesn't feel that they're being made to be reverse mentored, as it were. And that works. I think, I mean, I know it works for other government departments. I'd love to see a pupil reverse mentoring a teacher. What are we entertaining?
I agree with that. It's not just about compartmentalised curriculum, it's the core approaches and mentoring.
And the fear almost that I know some teachers had of not wanting to get it wrong, therefore not actually doing anything at all, which I would call a bit perverse. Heart in the right place, but that's no idea.
A culture to say something wrong, it's better to talk about it and learn through that.
Which goes back to our teacher training curriculum, how you make teachers disability confident. They can have a tick.
You just need to get it across to them to bring it back to individual needs. That's it. That just, you know, whether it's a disability or not, it's about individual needs. And if that happens to be through a disability, then okay, then, you know, let's look at what those needs are. But, you know, as I think you said, you know, they won't be the same for every person with cerebral palsy or with whatever disability they might have. So if you bring it back to that, it seems a lot less scary, I think.
Some people want to be treated exactly the same as everyone else. Some people need and want to be asked, do you need help? And it sometimes it may be the exact same person on a different day. And how do you empower someone to know when to ask, do you want their help for?
And not have people make assumptions. I get sick to death being told, oh, I'll make sure you get the lift because I know you won't want the stairs, will you?
Development, individual strengths as well. I think we tend to focus certainly in the health services. You monitor what somebody can't do, whereas I took that on a project with some psychologists in Reading, and we were looking at what the kids couldn't do. And in a particular case, as example, we found out that a little girl with Down syndrome had the most phenomenal memory. Yet nobody recognised it. So then use that to build on, you know, the self-support.
And challenge perception.
Yeah.
The tyranny of low expectations.
Yeah, which is scored the highest memory out of all class, the whole school.
Is there anything further you wish to capture, Amanda? We're in your hands. I know you've been something curious.
Well,
I'm here to facilitate.
It's actually in relation to your third point about planning for public facilities. The area I'd like to look at or to emphasise is transport. So I know in the consultation we talked about public transport, and that's extremely important because we're working in a hospital environment and a lot of our patients can't access public transport and they're using the hospital transport. And it's just to say, while we're in a big room, we're finding the system is failing a lot of people. One, they're not able to get to their appointments because perhaps the chair was too big for the transport that was organised, or they may need to come on a stretcher and that hasn't been organised. And then when they come to their appointments, they're waiting for a long time in order to get the specialist transport home. And I feel we're in a group that's from all over the country. We're from St. George's, and I think this is a pan-London, but a pan-UK problem. And if it would be possible to bring it forward, we would be delighted. And if you need any data, we would be delighted also.
Generally right about the transport. Well, yesterday we posted attention to accessibility of transport amongst people with disabilities. So these are these tools.
Wonderful, thank you.
What hat is he doing that on? What hat is he wearing to do that? Is it another APPG? Or?
It's not an APPG. It's another German APPG. It's leather touchdown part.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Well, just like to finish by thanking our co-sponsors, Caldwell and Ben and Trudy, for helping us with this, because without you and your support, I don't think we'd all be here.
No, we're not.
Thank you. But also just to say how really inspirational it is just to be sitting here with these wonderful people and hearing about the passion that there is and the people and the young people that you all represent. There's no doubt that there is this, we're pushing against an open door, but there is great deal to do. And I mean, I haven't really got anything else to add other than thank you. And I've just sent a piece of paper around, because if you would like to continue to be involved with this, could you please put your details on this scrappy piece of paper, that we will go and put them, if you are happy for us to have your details. We won't share them, but we will use them to contact you going forward. So thank you very, very much.
So I need to keep them in the room now whilst the paper goes around. My stand-up routine gets the toys.
I'll send you that one now, not direct.
What's the next step?
Yeah.
So, my proposed next step is that you, me and Mary sit down with Amanda and work out precisely what it is we want. Not just high-level aspirational paragraphs, which are lovely and we can all share and feel warm and cuddly about, but quite specific groups that actually we can say to a minister. So we're not happy with teacher training. How can we change it? Minister, what's your answer?
How do we get access to those people who can make those influential?
Well, some of the MPs. So if you give me a specific enough task, I can go off and do it, because I can create the bandwidth to do it. You go off and say, make the water touch space for people with cerebral palsy. I collapse in a heap like a melted pool of ice, because I'm going to start. So you need to give us micro, you know, my attention. I'll tell you that. Another thing. So I think that's where it goes next. That we've got those stuff that's embedded in both that report and that report. That we can transfer into actual meaningful activity. Some of that might lend itself to existing government bills. Some of it might be a 10-minute law bill or a private member's bill. If I ever got called out to tax a private member's bill, which I was a cerebral palsy bill within minutes. But no one ever pulled me out the hat for it in 40 years. Or
I've got my own 2 groups.
So there's lots of avenues we can go down, but we need that quite precise rather than the aspirational.
Yeah.
I love the aspirational, it makes it all feel good, but I always got it up and around the very precise. Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
If you haven't signed it, you can help them. Otherwise, we get no contact with you evermore.